Good evening. Welcome to the Privy Council. We're here this evening. We've got a lot of water to carry to make up for CFC's technical difficulties this morning, and we'll try to do our best to do that. I guess we've got to do two shows in one at this juncture. So we'll try to do that. I have the gang's all here this evening, and I have survived the best that medical science could throw at me today, and I'm here ready to talk about as we were talking about in the prep, the Wagnerian opera that is unfolded in Eastern Europe in the last several days. So I don't know. We lost Matt. I guess he'll be back in just a minute. He's been playing around with his internet connection. Has anybody else been having trouble with their internet connections in the last 10 days or so? It's been a little bit of an epidemic.
It has.
And I'm not sure if I should ascribe anything more to that other than seasonality or what. But we shall see. We shall see.
Climate change.
Yeah, no doubt it's climate change.
I'm sure.
I was pleased to see NATO jumped on board the climate ship.
Who?
NATO, OTAN. I'm sorry.
God. OTAN. Oh, okay.
The anesthesia is still wearing off. They told me not to do any heavy lifting until tomorrow morning. So, but OTAN has decided that this gives them a charter to run around in the Arctic as well. So I would think that they might be, grateful for climate change as Greenland melts into the North Atlantic, but we'll see what happens. They can look a gift horse in the mouth in many instances. So, Joe, what's new in Michigan?
I had a great weekend. Spent some time outdoors. If you don't get outdoors and connect with nature and God's creation, there's something wrong with you. It's a great way to recharge, re-energize, get back out there and get going. So we're doing it for Rainbow Ramadan, and getting pretty excited about stuff.
We're almost at Eid al-Fitr for Rainbow Ramadan. So
almost. Have a feast planned for tomorrow.
Although you guys probably saw that Admiral Rachel Levine has declared it the summer of Pride.
I don't care what Dick Levin has to say. So. His mama called him Richard. I'm gonna call him Richard.
Yeah, I don't want to get sidetracked on that issue, but I thought it was funny that
it is funny.
They were so thrilled about running around without their clothes on in New York that they decided to do it all summer. One more reason not to visit New York this summer.
One more.
Michael
Sir.
Bennett.
Sir.
What's new? What's new from your end? What's new from your end?
Not a lot. I mean, I'm writing a lot. I'm in my final death throes. I might have a third left, probably less than that. I'm hoping, this first draft will be done this weekend. By the end of the 4th, whatever. Oh, excellent. That's all I've been doing.
Excellent. You made mention a couple days ago in I think your Twitter feed, and I feel for you. I don't know how you keep up with events. I don't know how you can I don't know how you can outthunk what's going on in the real world.
Multitasking.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure we'll
get into it.
I'm sure you can. Mr. Hoff, Mr. James, what's up?
I'm amazed at the videos from Mike and the perfectly ripe banana video and all the other snaps on the internet. I appreciate all that, and it's that kind of summer. It's like you got to find, as Joe was saying, you got to find good little things amongst everything that's going on. So whether it's going for a walk in the woods or really enjoying that ripe banana, you just you got to find joy because it's still a little whack out there. And day to day, you engage in wacky daytime job work, and you got to seek out some of the beauty. So I'm really happy one of my orchid plants is blooming. So
Well, you're in Central Virginia. It's a pretty nice spot to be. It's a good spot to get outside and run around the Blue Ridge and see the
It is at that.
things.
It is at
See,
that.
see the things. So
Been doing a lot of fishing, so that's been good.
then you went and fucked it up. I have a confession. I other than deep sea fishing, where you're on a real boat and you're doing stuff and there's stuff going on all the time. I'm not a fisherman. I don't have the gene for being a fisherman. I'll waterfowl hunt. I'll do all that stuff, but I never got the fishing bug, and I guess more's the pity. But I just not, and fly fishing bores me to tears. I don't get it, and but that's my problem, not yours.
They
Matt,
took the joy away from you, Stan.
No. I find other ways to be joyful.
I thought maybe the fishing in the central Philippines. Surplus grenades in the reef.
Well, it's funny because this is not a story I'll tell now, but one day we'll talk about. I did go deep sea fishing off of Da Nang, but there's a big spent ordnance field, underwater, where guys would drop ordnance that they weren't able to use on their runs. It's dangerous as hell out there. I mean, it's really bad. So enough of that. Matt, what's up with you, buddy? Tell the folks what worlds you're conquering today, because every time I turn around, you're either teaching somebody how to do stuff lethal or starting a new business.
Yeah, we're got a bunch of new stuff in stock today. Most notably a HF through UHF digital mobile radio. It's SDR architecture and a bunch of other really neat things. But the Q900, I'll be talking a lot more about that over on my podcast because I want to eat up a lot of time talking about nerdy things. This unit is really, really cool, and it is flown completely under the radar. The ham radio world isn't real crazy about it for a couple of things that I'm going to address, but for a lot of other very good purposes, this is an awesome radio. This is an awesome communications equipment, and I think that it would be a hell of a deal at double the price. But anyway, enough about that. One thing to get really excited for the shooting community out there is worked out a business deal today, finalized it with a well-known night vision company. So we're going to be offering some of my longtime listeners have known about this for a while, but night vision, thermal, and we're bringing an IR laser that is virtually unknown out there to market, and I'm really, really excited because I'm going to have a hard time keeping these in stock. I already know it. So U.S. made, durable, mil-spec housing on it, very similar to a PEC 15 for under $1,000. So, ultra low profile as well on a rail. So for all you AK shooters out there, this is one that you're really, really get excited about. It's the one that got my attention initially, and anyhow, yeah. So enough about that. A lot of really cool things in the works. That is brushbeater.store. Brushbeater.store for everybody that doesn't know about the store. And I get emailed daily about, hey, where do I register for class? Where do I do this? It's like, I've got a store. You didn't, and they're always surprised. So yeah, got a lot of cool things over there.
Well, so I have a question. So I know that there's discussion of Joe and Angry and maybe Scott being down your way, like the third week of July. Mm-hmm. Is that still operative?
Yep, got the RTO course. The RTO course is going to be going on. So RTO, advanced RTO, and then signals intelligence.
You got room for one more?
Oh, always room for one more.
I'll bring my KA gear. I think that gets me in, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the free pass. That's if you know the knock and the handshake.
I still do. I still do. I still do.
Awesome.
I still do.
That's right.
All righty. Well, I'll be back to you. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I think that would be a fun time, and then we can go back over to
Oh,
Louisville
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
drink Maker's Mark or whatever we decide to do at that point. So
I'll,
I need a
thank you.
break. It's been a long push.
I will take you to the last capital of the Confederacy. We will visit it. I'll arrange.
Man,
Hopefully,
you guys are making me
hopefully
wish
we
I
can
could make it
arrange
out.
some. We can arrange some time to hang out in there, and I can show you some neat stuff that's a little bit off of the normal tour guide stuff.
That reminds me. I have instructed my wife to remind me to not forget the glass I have for you that I forgot to bring you last time. So,
Well, put it in the
Right.
cup holder of the Nissan Kicks, and that way you won't forget. Right?
I'm going to throw something at you.
Well, you may have the
Right
chance.
through the
So-
internet.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this smoke grenade
The-
just for you.
The beatings will continue until vehicle choice improves.
So, what's your? Do you now dominate commerce in your part of the state at this point?
Oh yeah, yeah. let
I'm
me
glad
tell
to
you.
hear
No, we're
I'm-
we're doing a small but healthy
I
business.
mean, is Walmart sort of poking around trying to figure out what you're doing?
No, so interestingly, Walmart kind of covers this, but not really. They just sell shelf space to various different companies that do that. But I hear that the company who runs the local one is not very happy. I'm fine with that because they're a 3-letter conglomerate operated out of China. So whatever.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, I'm glad to hear that things are moving along. All right, guys, let's get into our topic for this evening, which is will be a bit of a summary of sort of what we've seen happen, but I'm not going to go into detail because there's more words that have been written about this that can never be read. I think from my perspective, what I'd like to do with the group today is just talk about the trajectory of where we are and then where we think we're going. And where we think we're going is in two contexts. And what I'm really focused on tonight is what is the future of Belarus now with Wagner, now with new and improved Wagner embedded in Belarus. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of, what's going on in Russia in the aftermath of this. But I'm going to offer you a different view of the sort of copium that's being written in every major Western media outlet about this is the death knell for Putin and this and that and everything else. We'll give you a contrarian view, as you've probably come to expect, a contrarian view as to what I think is going on there. And I've encouraged council members to this is not a meeting of the General Secretariat of the Communist Party. We're not here to nod, and every time somebody says something, if you disagree, this is the place to say that you have a different idea as to what you think is going to unfold here. The only rule is that we do it politely, and in a gentlemanly fashion. Okay, so I think the good starting point in terms of where events are at this particular point goes back to 2020, August of 2020, which is when there were elections in Belarus. This was before Ukraine had started to cook off. Well, it was actually cooking off, but it wasn't on high boil at that point. And this is when Putin has always said that the near abroad was important to him. The near abroad has always been that collar of Eastern European and Central Asian countries that are buffer zones for the Russian Federation, and he's dearly wanted to have Belarus back fully in the fold. Ron, I see you in the chat. I understand you had some dental work today. I feel for you, buddy. I hope you enjoy the show, and we wish you were here, but fully understand as to why that's a non-starter today. And so the events in Belarus in 2020, third quarter of 2020, the protests and all the things that sort of had Lukashenko on his heels a little bit, were the opportunity for Putin to put his arm around Lukashenko and really sort of backstop him. And I think Lukashenko welcomed that for several reasons. And I think he had the example of Bashir Assad that showed him that if you're Putin's guy, as long as you toe the line, you're Putin's guy, and Putin will not leave you behind. And I think that the takeaway from the Syrian campaign has been that your ne'er-do-wells or your evil dictators or whatever you want to call them, those guys know that if Putin puts his arm around you, he's going to stick around, and he's not going to run when the going gets tough. And so this is a point where the trajectory of Belarus in 2020 started to change. I don't know how much of the $1.5 billion loan was actually for anything in Belarus, or how much of that was just a down payment on Lukashenko's well-being. But that's kind of where this takes off. So our next stop on this tour, what do we got here? I think we've got the next piece of the material that we prepared. All right, so this will fast forward just a little bit, and this was a little over about a month ago, almost a month exactly. This was May 28th when we talked about the fact that Lukashenko was in Moscow and supposedly fell ill during or after a meeting with Putin and was in the hospital. And a lot of people, went to the polonium tea thing straight away. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I don't think that Lukashenko was ill. This is my view. You can disagree with me. But I think this is all part of the choreography that got us to where we are today. And
let's remember that Maskarova is a Russian word, and it's been a part of their culture for a very long time.
Well, my point to you all is that this meeting in Moscow and the subsequent meeting on the 9th of June in Sochi, I believe, was the final choreography for the Wagnerian opera that we saw play out over the weekend. That was the time at which I think Putin put forward the idea that he was going to take a thorn out of his paw with the Wagner Group and populate Belarus with the Wagner Group. And we'll talk a little bit about why that does a lot of really important things for Putin, and that Lukashenko was going to be okay with it. And the sweetener on that was something that Belarus had wanted, which was the deployment of tactical nukes to Belarus as a thorn in NATO's, in OTAN's side, and also to give stability in Lukashenko's mind to what was going on. So this was a tweet that I posted. I think it's on the 28th, and Nikolai was there at the time. It's his son. We'll talk a little bit more about his son, and I think that Nikolai, this is the beginning of the hint of the creation of Belarus as the equivalent of North Korea in Europe. So we've now got the official leadership party of Belarus on stage. We're grooming the young son Nikolai to be the Knyaz of Belarus. But first, there's going to be a Putin Regency, and I believe that Regency has now begun with Prigozhin's exile, in air quotes, exile to Belarus. I'll stop and I'll take comments from the team.
Well, I think it's important to remember too that before Lukashenko became the man he is, he had some struggles, and there was some internal conflict in which Russia came to their aid. Wagner Group could also be forming somewhat of a Praetorian Guard there to ensure this line of succession.
I think there's a couple things that we'll talk about that make Belarus really attractive for Wagner, and but I think the first thing was to secure the regency for Nikolai, and let Alexander be sort of the he's become sort of the bloviating madman to a degree. If there's a 32-minute interview with the BBC that took place, I think, in 2021, and you could start to see the migration of Lukashenko to slightly crazy dictator, and Putin buddy. So I think that process is well underway. Mike, any thoughts? Matt, Jim?
I've watched or I listened, I guess, to the show. Nothing to do really with Russia per se, other than maybe an obvious observation. But again, in my view, is more worrying about Russia. The Belarus move. Yes, Russia, Putin, he's consolidating all these former Eastern Bloc entities into his whatever sphere he calls it now. I just think that's really ominous. It's an ominous overall development. And the other thing that I was thinking with this, I have to laugh when I look at some of the Twitter things and you say copium. When has there been a coup with forces the size that Wagner Group commands, that size coup that gets resolved in a day? Can anyone recall any such thing being, fixed in a day? Has that ever happened in history?
I can't think of one.
I don't think so. And you would think the light bulb would come on to a lot of people doing this copium. This is clearly unprecedented. If a lover spat, whatever, between Putin and what's his name, get resolved in just a hair over 24 hours, that's got to tell you something. We're
still resolving the great People's Tour of January 6th still, right? So,
well, yeah. But it leads me to something even more concerning from the U.S. point of view, and it goes beyond this administration. I think it goes into many administrations. But our analysts quote our brain trust that supposedly is driving the country. It's wishful thinking, and they are unable to take obvious new data and put it into a new calculus and crank out with these new variables a different outcome. That worries the hell out of me, and that goes into business. That goes, climate change. It goes into a lot of things that affect us as citizens, and I'm absolutely amazed with this particular incident. And all these people coming out, we have a narrative to protect. My God, every single one of them should be fired as, quote, analysts if they can't do their actual job, and that is to protect us. I mean, I don't want to hear some motherfucker talk just to hear him talk. My assumption is he's competent. He has years and years and years of training or years and years of study, and he's applying that to a particular problem set because he's somewhat unique, and he's bringing something to the table in that analysis, not just parroting today's narrative. And that, to me, this wishful thinking application is absolutely it's mesmerizing to watch, but it makes me afraid.
Yeah, I think that is scary, that we're at sort of the dead end of our ability to process a narrative, and that what's going on now is that everybody has to genuflect, tie themselves into knots in order to support the current thing, even when the current thing is pretty obviously not reality. But we have to do that because we can't jettison ourselves from this strategy because we don't have another strategy, or those people who are in power and are running the strategy are so beholden to that strategy, financially and otherwise, that they can't jettison it. And I think being in that intellectual cul-de-sac is, as you say, really a dangerous place to be, because we no longer
And
have
if
the
those
ability.
if those
Yeah, go ahead.
people, if they cannot retract from a given narrative based on new data, I had something else in my mind. It's already gone. But they're of no value. They need to be fired. We need people that are adroit in their thinking and can then come forward with new recommendations to whomever, and wait for the blithering idiot in charge to still fuck it up with bad decisions. But you at least gave different courses of action based on factual information. I just find it worrisome. I mean, a worse example is COVID. It was clear the vaccine kind of was not all it was, and it was that simple. It was a simple thing to say, okay, this vaccine is not effective. We need to change our strategy. My apologies. You know, and if you can't do that, we don't need you to be at the levers.
It's not a new thing, Mike, but it's become more rigid. I mean, I couldn't sleep last night, and so I was flipping through and I started watching the movie made in the '60s about the Battle of the Bulge. That's got Robert Shaw and Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda plays an intelligence lieutenant in the Ardennes, and he's convinced that the Germans are going to attack through the Ardennes at Bastogne, and that very thin point in the American lines. And the entire chain of command thinks he's crazy now. And they start down and they say, you know, you were a cop for 20 years before you joined the army. Nobody else in the intel community has come to the same conclusions and places no credence on your readout on this. And he said, what makes you? He says, because I talk to people. He'd been talking to German prisoners and one thing and another. And so the intellectual inflexibility of large organizations is not new. I think, though, that what is new in our instance is the spread and the amount of rigidity. You have to embrace the narrative, or you are politically unreliable. And if you're politically unreliable, you're out. And I think that's what's dangerous about what we're doing now. So, and you know, I think we'll lead into that. That sort of leads me into Jim, and I know Jim likes to talk about this quite a bit in terms of the inflexibility of the American position, from a business perspective, from a military perspective, from a diplomatic perspective. And I'll ask you to pull up that picture of Nikolai in his school uniform, because this is something that I had lost track of, but I think it's a nice segue into shifting the conversation to Jim's thoughts. Have you got it? That one. Okay. So where does the Knyaz of Belarus, where's he going to school these days? Beijing University.
Oh, interesting.
So,
how much you want to bet, though, he has a Russian, not a Belarusian security detail?
I don't know the answer to that, but I was scrolling around today, and I was surprised I didn't know this, and B, I guess I wasn't surprised that it's actually true. But that colors things a little bit, does it not?
Absolutely.
I found that interesting. So anyhow, he's being schooled up.
It's just kind of proof that the more things change, the more they stay the same. This is pre-World War I levels of royal families intermingling and sending hostages amongst each other, and
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So we won't belabor this, but I found that point interesting, that he's now studying in Beijing, which I think will we'll fold that back in when we get into our conversation about Belarus as North Korea, because I think that Putin has watched for quite some time the utility of China having North Korea as sort of that mad dog that's staked out in the yard, and you can let them off the leash from time to time to do things that you don't want to do, and but you want them done without attribution. So I think that's probably where we're headed, and I'll let Jim expound on that and anything else he wants to talk about to this point.
I think, we talked about this, what was it, last weekend or whatever it was. It just makes sense because we've been watching the Chinese circle Europe and try to figure out a place to land and put down, industrial capacity and investment where they're secured under their rule of law, not European or American rule of law, because, they've seen what we do with the dollar and we've weaponized against them. And we now know that the Chinese are supplying weapons technology and manufacturing to the Soviets.
I can't wait for Armani to pull up shop and move to Belarus, right?
Yeah, I actually think you're going to see there'll be a lot of technical assembly work that moves to Belarus. So things that are for the European Union, technical assembly, So if you're gonna build smart munitions or drones, why not assemble them in Europe? I believe that's kind of where we're going. And also it's just this deniability capacity. You got Prigozhin there, you've got these guys who have all the mines in Africa. It just makes too much damn sense. You can just run it through Belarus and say, geez, yeah, those guys, they're crazy. And the Belarusians can support the diplomatic Krisha for the boys from Wagner, and just you can change the name from Wagner to something else, and it's kind of like BLM, Acorn, and Occupy Wall Street here in the United States. It's just who cares what it's called, as long as you control the assets and you get the donations, you're good.
I have an affinity. I'd like to see this be something less German. I think Pushkin deserves some recognition, but we'll see how that plays out. Matt, you look really like you're thinking hard. So I want you to lay out your pearls for it.
Well, I'm quite polite and I wait my turn. I was the interruptive student when I was coming along, so I learned my lesson. But to Colonel Bennett's point regarding failing upward and having people fired for their incompetence, especially in the intelligence analysis field. Unfortunately, and I know that you concur with this based on our conversations, everyone here will, we're beyond accountability. Unfortunately, we're beyond that. They have a narrative to follow and a line to toe. And so whenever there is a failure, an abject one, they simply whitewash it. It's erased. Oh, well, we got it wrong. No big deal. Yeah, actually it is. It's a very big deal that you got it wrong. It's a very big deal that you're calling something that was not a coup. For anybody out there that remembers one of Tom Cruise's better movies in his career, Valkyrie. This was quite literally Operation Valkyrie in reverse. It was one that was controlled, but it happened for a very specific reason. And this is something that I know I called it from the moment that I saw what was going on. This is a ruse. They're moving forces. They're moving forces in daylight, and they have to do something because they're stalled out on their lines. They're not going to move any further forward, and the Russians have done exactly what they're going to continue to do. This is their order of battle and has been since the Red Army was founded. That their special forces, their guys, their stormtroopers, all the way back to the genesis of what we would call special warfare in the 20th century. we call the stormtrooper tactics or the shock infantry tactics that comes from the Germans, from the Wehrmacht. Well, the Russian version of that was to lay mines and be sappers, and that's what they call them, and bestowed upon them those units the title of guards. Like in the West, we call all of them Spetsnaz, but for them internally, they call them guards. That is a title of nobility among their armed forces. And so this has been something that they were going to do, and they were going to continuously do. It was predictable. And so now when we see the footage that's coming out of the Ukrainians driving Bradleys, driving the German armor right up to the lines and getting blown up, this was all predictable. This was something I predicted as soon as they said that, oh, we're gonna give them all these Bradleys and they're magically gonna win. Well, they didn't win with what we gave them the first time. They didn't win. So we're going to continuously escalate their equipment with this using things that are meant for combined arms warfare, but not giving them the tools and the experience they need in combined arms warfare. So they're only using things piecemeal. It's not working, right? And so it's going to continuously not work. So the Russians know that they're stalled out. So what do? You have to pivot, right? Patton did this. This was one of the most brilliant moves in military history, was Patton pivoting the Third Army, right? And so you can't say Ryazan, which is the Russian equivalent of West Point, that they don't study these things. This is all indicative, and Stan, we've talked about this, and I've talked about this with each of the people on the council here. The level of hubris is the most important piece of this. The level of hubris that has been exhibited at all levels, whether it's on social media with the punditry that should know better but don't, all trickling all the way down. And we know that this exists to a high degree in the intelligence community as well. They're failures. They should all be fired, and they're not going to be. Now, where this all fits when we put these things together, right? Where they all intermesh, where these ideas intersect, is Belarus, and your analogy of the creation of a European North Korea, I think is a very good one, and it's not one that I had previously considered. I limited it to Wagner's forces, which are under the command of Putin, by the way. They've been an apparatus of the GRU for forever. Prigozhin is not the real head. If anybody buys that, you could go smoke crack with hobos on a ridge somewhere. No. Putin is running this. Right? He's the one running this. He's the man. I mean, who else would he put in there but a guy that he knows he's broke bread with for a very long time now, knows it inside and out?
He's eaten his bread. That's the key point. I mean, Prigozhin has been the guy who's run the catering, the food service in the Kremlin.
So taking that into account, I strictly limited it to a military objective and them being in position to take Kiev rather quickly. Now, will they do that? Obviously, it remains to be seen. Do they have the capacity to do that? I think so. It's going to be heavy. The loss of life is going to be heavy. But obviously, as we know, historically and in recent events, the Russians are not scared of that. They will lose. They will throw bodies, just like Grant at Vicksburg. They will throw as many bodies as they need to the front until they win, until something breaks, and they're going to continue to do that.
I think that's what ought to have the Ukrainians concerned.
The Kiev regime, the Zelensky regime, I think that its days are numbered. This is going to be a horrific failure for the American intelligence community, and I think that we're already seeing the early fractures in NATO now. Just wait until Kiev falls.
Well, I can say this. I can say this, that it's pretty clear that Poland and the Baltic dwarves, they understand what's going on. Those because they are vibrating. They're like a tuning fork that's been hit on a desk. Those guys are vibrating at millihertz at this point. But I don't necessarily see anything else going on. I was struck. I was struck with the notion that while all this was playing out, the Ukrainians did nothing in the context of their offensive. And I would have thought that that if you had storm shadows or you had whatever, long range weapons that we or NATO or some OTAN has given them, that it would have been the time to have done something to sort of foment or further foment the disruption inside Russia, for that matter. I mean, nobody wants to drive Bradleys into the minefields that I've seen videos of people just, being decimated as it relates to the the strategy for the current counteroffensive. But I was amazed that they did absolutely nothing. I'd like your guys' view on this. I think that was Washington telling them to stand down. I believe that's a manifestation of us jerking their chain and telling them to not do anything until we see how this plays out.
I think originally I kind of dismissed the whole claims of, well, we know where the 6.2 billion went. Ha ha ha, kind of inside joking.
Yeah.
My friend Ian Burlingame was commenting to me about that, and I disagreed with it, and kind of just like very derisively dismissed that as this is nonsense. But now taking into account the fact that the Ukrainians, who are not stupid either, they're not stupid. They right now they're suffering from a lack of reality that, hey, you're in a stalemate and you're getting all your equipment from the West, and that's going to stop in the near future. So you might ought to, you might ought to explore other options. But I think that there's a lot of them now who are looking at this like, hey, we should have acted right then, but we didn't, and we were told not to. And it lends credence to that theory. Of course, we're never going to know. I think that it is interesting that Putin is offering Belarus a $1.2 billion aid package now. Timing is everything, which he's, hey guys, here's your cut, of what we just fleeced the West for. It would be interesting. I think it would be pretty humorous, but in a morbid kind of way.
So how do you think we got to where we were? What was the choreography here? Do we think that there was any truth to the notion that Russian military units attacked Wagner in the rear 4 or 5 days ago? Or was that all part of the production set for the
No, I think it's part of the production, and all those videos of Ka-52s burning, that could have been from any time. They've lost a few.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
There was no debris field.
I haven't seen it.
There was no debris field. And with the Ka-52 that was burned up, allegedly, there was an aircraft that was burned up. Look at where it was burned up. It's in a grassy field that has taxi lines on it. Come on. I mean, come on. Yeah, where's the debris field? Like, dude, I've done aircraft recovery when rotary wing assets would go down. Unfortunately, I've done 2 of them, and it throws debris everywhere. It doesn't look anything like that. So as soon as I saw that one, I stopped. No way. This was a demo in place. Here's the other thing too. The other video that was coming about, and I had one of my followers on Twitter that was, kind of contentious about it. Oh, see, this is combat. It's going on. Well, it's like also a Ka-52 that was firing. It fired off its chaff and then fired a rocket in return. But if you'll notice this video, nobody knows where this video was shot. We don't know anything about it. There's no timestamp on it. There's no date on it. There's no data behind it. We don't know anything about it. And if you look in the background, because backgrounds tell you everything in a photograph or video, there's an overpass and a rather substantial series of overpasses underneath it. There's no traffic on it. There's no traffic on it. So there's no vehicles out there. There's nothing moving. If this was all of a sudden a crazy coup that was in progress and it was a civil danger that was to the Russian Federation, you know, within an hour or two, do you really think that they could shut down all the transit off of major arteries like that? I mean, we don't even do that in the United States effectively. You're still going to see people driving around. Within an hour or two, this is ridiculous. But we don't know where those videos were shot. We don't know anything about it. I think it was all a stage show. Did maybe a couple of people get a little too into the moment? Maybe because you got to think. I mean, a lot of Wagner's recruits are prisoners and ex-cons. And hey, old Vlad over here just put me in prison, for just a couple of years ago, making me do the Slav squat on concrete. This is my chance to shoot back at him, and I'm just playing a role. So some of it may have went on, but for the most part, no.
So let's talk about what comes next. And Mike, I want to circle back to you because you made some good points as it relates to the paucity of sort of original thinking on the OTAN and the U.S. side of the table. I don't see any movement. Oh, I have seen movement, and that is I know we airdropped another $500 million to Ukraine Saturday or Sunday. I've maybe Monday. I've sort of lost track of the time frame. And Lloyd Austin's come out and said it's not over till we say it's over, and we're in it to win it. And somebody made the comment to me, it sounded like Westmoreland saying we only need 60,000 more troops in Vietnam back in the day. Do you think do you think there's any capacity, particularly going into a presidential election, for this administration, given the status of what I've come to call the summer Bandera reunion tour, is there any ability or desire or willingness to pivot out of this, all but the kitchen sink approach to Ukraine? Because, every once I will go in and look at what Ben Hodges writes and look at what some of these other people write. And they're all rabid, and they've sort of cooled off and say, well, we're going to take it slow. But do we think that there's any capacity to pivot away from just more war in the U.S. administration? And by extension, the OTAN guys?
I don't think so. They've bet it all on a pair of sixes, and they're not going to back off from it. At this point, they would have to admit they were wrong, and they can't be. So I don't see that happening.
Mike, your thoughts?
I just think they bet on 3 sixes.
Yeah, I agree 100%. No, I mean, they are entrenched in what they think is effective political warfare internal. And they're just like, they are, and when I say they, it's not just Biden, it's Trump, it's DeSantis, it's everyone. They're very myopic, and they're really not thinking out of the box. If you want to, from my mind, I guess maybe, boil it down to what really is happening. Things are changing so drastically across the entire globe with these alliances that are absolutely outflanking us without any doubt. And we will continue to do these defensive kind of maneuvers while we're $32 trillion in debt. And we do not have the initiative. We are nowhere near close to being able to take the initiative. Everything we do is defensive and in response to someone else's initiatives and offensive actions. And we still play that poorly. So I'm looking for the guy that has the balls to stand up and say, we're $32 trillion in debt. There's an entire new world order that is aligning against us, and our allies are just not up to the might against which we are arrayed. And we need to do something very different. We need to divest, and just, orient everything we got left on this hemisphere from top to bottom. There's our conquest. That's what we need to do. Everything over there is over there.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
logistically challenging, great expense, yada yada.
Yeah,
So
I'm
no,
in,
to answer your question, no. These guys aren't
yeah,
going to do that.
I'm in violent agreement with you on that. And I don't know. Is that RFK Jr.? Is he making his way to that position, do you think? And is that going to matter in the context of democratic politics?
See, this is the sort of thing that kind of drives me crazy about Twitter or social media or the news in general.
Yeah, I understand.
All we see is, oh, look at Robert F. Kennedy. He must be on steroids. He's got a big chest and he lifts weights. I don't fucking care at all, one iota, about
Mhm.
anything other than every single the uh,
You're breaking up on us, Mike. I'm sorry.
in their position on. What are you on? I got a lot of squiggly stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
Still on?
Yeah, you're good.
Hey, that's all I care about. I want to know where they're going to drive this great big Cadillac. That's all I want to know. I don't care about
Mhm.
your legal battles. I don't care if your son does cocaine. Those things are important to me, but they're somewhere down the bottom of the list that we do need to address, but they're not necessarily, the whole Hunter Biden thing. It really is moralistically an imperative, but it's not going to win the election. What we need to do first is win the damn election, and that goes across Congress and all that stuff. And then maybe we can do something. But all this other stuff is blather, and it doesn't interest me in the least bit.
Well, I think I'm going to build on your earlier point, and that is, I think we're well down the path of exhibiting Einstein's theory of insanity, which is
Yeah.
doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Because if I look at the progression of events in Ukraine, I look at the progression of events in Afghanistan, I look at the progression of events in Iraq and Vietnam before that, ex Grenada, and maybe the canal. Joe, you can talk to that at the appropriate point. But I mean, uh, we we have played the same cards in pretty much the same sequence, and to date, pretty much to the same outcome. Korea as well, and I think we're so far into this, we don't know what to do. I mean, our big response to this opportunity, because I can only frame it as an opportunity from the West perspective, over the weekend was Tony Blinken announced that we're going to sanction Wagner's
Yeah.
artisanal gold mining operations in Africa. That's it. That's as feckless and as weak as you can get. And what has the mother of all sanctions gotten us since February of 2022, when the current president looked in the camera and said, in 30 days Russia will cease to exist economically?
Well, how can you sanction uh, a gold mine in one country when it goes to another and literally none of it passes through your country? It's on paper. It does literally no
Exactly.
good.
Exactly.
And
Jimmy.
we're not supposed
It's
we're not
just
supposed to know that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just something they can point to and say, "Well, look what we did."
It makes
Yeah.
the folks at
Come on.
DOJ happy. They can run around with their paper and say, "Hey, isn't
And
this
they'll
cool?"
put travel bans on people who don't travel here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't get out of their darn Toyota trucks.
because they're
And
they're
they would definitely get stopped at the border because the ZSU 23 in the back of the pickup.
they are
You know,
they are
I mean,
collectively unwilling to be ruthless, and that's what's
well,
required.
you know, the sad thing is, Mike, we don't even have to be ruthless. We just have to be coordinated and thinking and responsive to these changes in threat. And
Yeah.
if you, I mean,
I only say ruthless, Jim, just because I'm looking at a timeline. I want results like before I die, because we're already talking what's really necessary to be done. Still going to take 20 years, but we
you
got to
sound like
start
a
doing
man
something.
you sound like a man who's running out of good bananas up there in Maine, man.
Listen, Mike Bennett
Not
is
in Maine.
immortal, so it doesn't matter. He's not
No,
gonna die.
no, but I mean this is why when Stan and I were circling this Belarus problem and looking at this, we're shaking our heads. And even guys like Max in his messaging was like, look, there's just something missing here. I mean, we're joking about Big Bird, right? It's like one of these things just doesn't belong here because this was just wrong. It had all the representations of a complicated game being played that made no sense, and the events around it were all conjured, and the outcomes are interesting because uh, it's clear that the Russians had teams on the ground in Beijing. Beijing had teams on the ground in Minsk. There was a plan afoot to move things around. So, Stan was running the Russian nesting doll image for the last 72 hours. There was a ton of that behavior going on national level between China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and Belarus. And they are doing something. And that our people don't really seem to care because their policy says that they've written the Russians off, right? The Russians are going to come apart. Putin's going to fall.
This guy wrote a book about all those guys getting together and
Yeah,
doing
exactly.
something. Well, part of a book.
But there,
Best 2/3 of a book ever published.
That was in Aramaic, though. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So, but you've got this interesting problem, which is, they'll say something like, Belarus isn't important anymore. It's a sideshow. And, the Chinese investment in Belarus, the Chinese are more than 50% of the industrial investment in Belarus. The Chinese are capital heavy and long in Belarus. The Russians are their partners in these investments in Belarus. The monies being used are coming from the artisanal mines in Africa. They're coming through the banks in Dubai. This is the stuff that we don't understand. We think that if we say, "Oh, don't do that," we're going to sanction you, that they're going to stop. No, they're not going to stop. They're going to build their little kingdoms in which they can do this stuff. And Belarus has good labor, decent education levels, and they can build sophisticated electronic components, read weapon systems, and we can't do anything about it. And so the Chinese and the Russians are going to cooperate on this, and so are the Iranians. And guess what? They're going to make a lot of money selling those in the Middle East and Asia.
Yeah. They're going to rename it Victor's Arm Mart.
Yeah, exactly. And I can guarantee you Bout is on the ground in Minsk, helping explain how you're going to sell this stuff.
Well,
yeah, and aren't we glad? That we let Victor Bout out of the Supermax prison for the WNBA player? And what Evan, what's the guy, the Wall Street Journal reporter? What's his name? What do Evan's parents think about that? I mean, he's still in the basement of the Lubyanka. Brittany Griner is back playing basketball, and the world's #1 arms dealer in the history of arms dealers, and that's a pretty substantial list, is now in Minsk getting ready to fire up the machine all over again. But we got out a trans African American basketball player in return. So
what a deal.
What a
fair
deal.
trade. Seems fair.
Fair
So,
trade.
yeah,
Go ahead,
so I think
Mike. I want Mike. I
sorry.
got Mike off.
It's almost as good as Burndall. You know, it's the same.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
It
the
is
same.
Bergdahl level sort of stuff.
It is literally the same thing. Yeah, you were saying. I guess I caught Stan wincing in your talk there, Jim, when you said we. And again, it goes back to General Mike Flynn got fired from DIA basically because he took, he was kind of going a different direction than Obama administration. He was doing what he thought as a 30 some odd year military intelligence professional, analysis with an unbiased look, an unbiased outcome. His direction to all the people that work for him is look, follow the facts, go down that road. These are the facts. And then tell me what you think based on that data. And I'm going to run that up the chain. So you saw this kind of, we're going to take actual thinkers that are in the apparatus called the United States government, and we're going to squash them. That fell under Obama. And where I'm going is I do think there are people that are, wearing a blue badge or whatever in the United States government that impartially look at all this stuff and probably in their own minds have formulated, maybe even written stuff down, and sent it up the chain, and it got quashed at some point. I don't think Americans are that fucking stupid. And again, all this is a very unhealthy application of power from the very top level down in foreign policy, saying every swinging dick has to fall in line with this groupthink narrative, or else, we're gonna, put you in the memory hole somewhere, and your career's gonna end. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't arbitrarily just say everybody was fooled by all this stuff and believes. Yeah, it's floated up to the top where there's corruption, and they're kind of controlling this narrative. But I think there are some people that have enough brains to put one on one together on this. I have some faith.
I agree. Let me shift gears here for just a minute. I want to talk about what are the ripple effects in Russia of this, intended and perhaps unintended. There's enough ink that's been written about how this seals Putin's fate. He just doesn't know it yet because he's been shown to be weak.
Wishful thinking.
I think it is, and I really do think it is. I will say this though, I am somewhat surprised, but maybe I was just ahead of myself, and he's closer on the ground. We saw Shoigu was under house arrest. We saw Shoigu at the meeting where the MOD guys got dressed down. I don't think that story's over, but I think Putin has decided to hit pause on that, and I think that's what he told him in that meeting, that he wasn't going to take any action against these guys at this particular point. But they have made, they made a dog's breakfast out of this operation since February of last year, and Prigozhin had a point in terms of the way they had, and maybe this was part of the choreography, but I don't think it was, that they were hamstringing the only combat effective unit they had in Wagner. So I think that portion of the opera still has to play out. But I think for now, Putin has said, I'm not going to give the West any more fodder in this situation. And I think by not being vindictive or not taking action against Shoigu and Gerasimov and everybody else, I think he's frozen everybody else in place. Look, he understands the power structure far better than I, but I think he's frozen anybody who might be an opponent, frozen them in place at this particular point, and not given them a reason to make any more trouble. I think he's very focused on finishing up the Bandera summer tour. I think he's very focused on getting this move there was a band, or it was Pantera, not Bandera. But there, I think he's very focused on getting the pivot to Belarus done, and then we'll see what happens to whom at some point. So
I know I should know this, but has Gerasimov reappeared?
I have not seen him. No.
Yeah, I haven't either. So that's still an unresolved question.
I haven't seen anything on him, but Shoigu's been really, really busy with the Chinese and the Cubans, and I'm going to assume the Belarusians.
Well, somebody said that the fact that he's been appearing at meetings proves that he's not under house arrest. I said that actually does no such thing.
Yeah, that
I
doesn't.
mean, if you're under house arrest, you can make him appear wherever you want. So.
True, true,
I'm gonna guess-
and I would not put it beyond Shoigu to have sold Gerasimov down the river, and
Absolutely.
Exactly.
he may be the guy, because Shoigu is a survivor. He's proven that. And Gerasimov may be the guy who gets the bullet in the basement of the Lubyanka for all this stuff. We'll see, and we won't. It may already have happened, and we just don't know about it. So I see that Prigozhin had his Embraer in Belarus, and then I saw that it turned around and flew back to Moscow yesterday. But he's there, and I literally read he's looking for housing. So he's running around with a real estate agent, I guess. And there's 8,000 Wagner troops on their way to a camp about 200 kilometers from Kiev, building out a facility there that ultimately will house about 24,000 folks from Wagner. And they're embraced with open arms. Lukashenko says he wouldn't mind at all to have a unit like Wagner around. Those boys know how to do some stuff, and it'd be helpful to have around the house.
It's probably like that old base that was in Expendables 3. Or is it 2? I don't know, whichever one it was. It's
Well,
like New York City.
I don't
Mel
know.
Gibson totally lives there for real too. Like
In
totally,
Belarus? Yeah.
that's totally his place, man.
Well, I was
Him and
kind of
Steve
thinking it
Seagal.
was. I was, and Depardieu too, right? Doesn't he? He's a Russian citizen these days. But
Yeah.
I was kind of waiting for Mike to come back, because I was thinking it maybe looked like Fort William Henry Harrison there, where the Devil Brigade outside of Helena, Montana, when they got there. But it won't look that way for long. So, and apparently Lukashenko's got his defense minister on board, said he wouldn't mind having some boys like the Wagner boys around as well. So we'll see what
what's
happens.
most telling in this is that if I honestly believed that someone had just attempted to overthrow my government, I wouldn't immediately sign a contract with them to guard my nuclear weapons in a third country.
No,
Yeah, there's a lot of tells
No.
in here. There's a lot of tells in this
I mean,
process.
I've only been in a security business for, I don't know, 30 something years, but that seems like a bad idea.
Well, I think for folks, and there's a couple of ways to go about this. I do want to spend a little time on Wagner. And Watcher, if you've got that map, or we can start with this. I think, Jim, you sent me that article from Forbes. You want to run us down through where Wagner's making their money these days?
It's mining, protection, and security across Africa. They're beginning to go into Latin America. It's anywhere that there's a government that is unstable and prone to payoffs. They're the perfect people to have support you as you do your capital heavy mining operation, because they're not subject to the legal strictures of other organizations. So, you've got something that has the flexibility of transnational organized crime.
If you'll stop right there, Watcher, I want to hold that thing on Syria, because I want to come back to that. So you're good.
Stan's good to stop on the Syria thing, because, it's an example of where we've had sufficient amount of time to see where the money flows are and the impact of those money flows, and some of the purpose of why we still have forces on the ground in Syria. I think Stan's better to talk to this, but they are everywhere that there is a problematic, resource-rich environment that they can operate in, and there's always somebody who'll buy a commodity. Doesn't matter what the commodity is.
Yeah. I saw some video from over the weekend while everybody else was looking at Russia and Ukraine about Russian forces shit hammering the latest Mullah Caliphate, whatever, in Syria. And I think it's worth noting that Wagner was doing what our 900 troops now do in Syria, all during the Syrian civil war. And we sort of took a bite out of their cash flow by interjecting our troops on behalf of the Kurds in terms of providing security for oil shipments in Syria. But if we pull up that map, I think, Watcher, it really is worth 1,000 words in terms of where Wagner is operating. And it should give you pause that one of those blue blobs is Venezuela.
I was going to say Venezuela, shocker.
Yeah. So it's
I see one of my favorite places to visit. Liberia appears to be on the map as well. Oh.
Yeah, Libya for sure. It's what's that section of New York? It's Hell's Kitchen all over the place. I mean, it's where the Cubans used to be in Africa, basically.
You know what? That's actually a good point.
It's where the Cubans used to be.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to see Cuba light up soon. It'll be a pretty color of blue with some of the Belarusian green ribbon.
I'd also like to point out Sri Lanka over there.
Yeah, they've got the port contract, I think, up north. So yeah, they go where we can't. These are all countries that it's very difficult for Americans to operate.
Are we going to get Mike? Are we going to get Mike back because Mike is uniquely positioned? Nope, he's got to go.
No, he had to go.
All right, that's too bad because that all of that blue stuff in Africa is Mike's bailiwick, particularly for Brian O'War, the book that he wrote about the lithium mines and so forth. That's ground zero.
And so you've got Sudan out there. You've got that all lit up now, and so there's got to be somebody like Wagner who can protect those assets. And the Chinese are beginning to send their private military contractors in, but the Chinese just don't have the capability that Wagner's developed over the decades, right? Wagner's
they're obviously smarter than us. They're not in Somalia or Ethiopia, so
there's no resource.
Exactly.
If there was gold or oil or rare earth of consequence, they'd be there. But that's the tell. If there's something to protect and something we can take out on trucks, if we can be the logistics security folks and we can be the banking folks, we'll do it. So it's a transnational enterprise, guys, and it's too valuable to give up.
And this is why
Chinatown, Jake.
It is Chinatown. This is why I chuckle when I read all these articles, and I shouldn't do it because it's not good for my blood pressure. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I mean, I read all these articles about Putin's not going to sign a new contract with Wagner. Okay, so who is Belarus? How's Belarus going to pay for Wagner? The aid package from Russia to Belarus. But on the other hand, is that Wagner is literally coining money around the globe at this particular point. And so, it's a little bit of that, please don't throw me in the briar patch sort of thing. So now they're out from under the conflict with the Ministry of Defense, and that still remains to be settled in terms of leadership within the Ministry of Defense. But we've exiled, note the word, we've exiled, and this is no different than Roman days. There were generals that were exiled after campaigns when they got sideways with the Senate and what have you. So he's now been exiled to Belarus. He's now got a contract with Belarus. He's now got his cash flow from all these other aspects going on. And by the way, if you want one more little piece of evidence that this is all kabuki theater, They just built a new headquarters for Wagner in St. Petersburg. It opened in November of last year. And in the midst of all this, there was no Russian troops that surrounded the Wagner Center in St. Petersburg at all. And it opened for business Monday morning like a regular work day. So if you need one more indicator that this was all sort of
Well, and during the whole event, Putin is alleged to have gone to St. Petersburg. I wouldn't run into my enemy's gauntlet.
no,
And that's another point I wanted to point out about this whole thing is that he wouldn't have launched an actual coup attempt from Rostov-on-Don. He would have launched it from either his other building in Moscow or from St. Petersburg and been much closer to his objectives. It was never a coup.
yeah, I can imagine in our country the A-10 drivers who would have died would have given their left testicle to been able to have taken action against that convoy coming up the M4 towards Moscow.
Right.
I mean, come on, it begs credulity.
Yeah, it would have been destroyed. Absolutely.
Yeah, but
All right, guys, let's take a little speculation here, because I am and I hopefully we've convinced a good number of you that Belarus is going to be the agent provocateur in the European hemisphere, similar to North Korea. And Jim and I have joked about it becoming the maquiladora in terms of production of stuff that goes bang in the night. I really think you're going to start to see that happen straight away. I think you're going to see Iranians. I don't think it's going to be too much longer that you're going to get reports of North Koreans being on the ground in Belarus as well, providing logistical and other technical support.
I think
So
that a great example of what could happen here is exactly what you said. But if you remember last year, that hypersonic missile that had us grounding flights that day, that North Korea launched. Well, North Korea doesn't have one. They launched a Chinese one. And China said, hey, do us a favor. Let's rattle these people. Launch this, right? And I think you probably see the same thing through Belarus.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you're going to start to see ballistic missiles dropping into the Baltic Sea just to keep the dwarves on their toes for too much longer. And now they've got other people, the Finns and maybe the Swedes, although the Swedes burned the Quran this weekend, and that's going to have Erdogan all shook up about the admission of the Swedes into OTAN. And
that may be what they want.
That may be what they want. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It really is the Groucho Marx school of never be a member of a club that would have you as a member.
But if you look at who's really just wetting their shorts now, it's the Lithuanians, right?
Yeah,
so the Lithuanians are going to get a full-time German brigade or division or whatever they can scrape together.
It's about 5 times what they have now.
I know, and it's just staggering to me that the Germans have said, "Okay, well, we're going to send this unit." How many years is it going to take for the Germans to put a unit together and get it? Get it to Lithuania.
Germany doesn't have the capacity to send that brigade right now.
Oh God! So you've got that little narrow notch, Sulaki, the corridor between Kaliningrad and Belarus and Lithuania. That's a place that is going to become a hotbed of material movements. I think on a scale that the Europeans are completely unprepared for. The shit that's going to be coming out of Belarus into Kaliningrad for export, under what I would say would be diplomatic bond, is going to be a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, that is, and we talked about it. I think you mentioned it. My mind likes to play games with the fact that guys from Wagner can now show up carrying diplomatic passports from Belarus, and
yeah, exactly,
with immunity. I mean, they can do whatever the hell they want to do, in terms of all sorts of shenanigans, and
it doesn't give the Russians any gas.
No, it doesn't. I think there's a chess piece missing on the table, though. So I'm looking for who becomes, and this is going to be an important position to fill with the right person. Who becomes the new Minister of Foreign Affairs for Belarus is going to be an interesting tell. it's going to say a lot about the rapid development of Belarus into North Korea. So I think that's pretty much a wrap on this evening, guys. Unless you've got something else you want to talk about or you want to touch on, give you all a chance to talk about what you're doing or what have you. But I think you need to watch what happens in Belarus. I think it's going to become probably the most interesting place, certainly in Europe. And I think that we have not seen the end of Wagner. And if you really think about it, there's no way that Putin would throw away something that has developed such value for him.
Right.
Just no way.
Yeah.
So. And they've been sent away to boarding school because they've irritated the family, right? Yeah. And he wasn't able to take the family apart at this point in time, but he remembers who's being a pain in the neck.
Do we have any super chats that we need to back up on, guys?
Will the world get over U.S. threshold? Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of that recently, and beyond us trying to look rich, it's really, really hard for U.S. companies to develop capital-heavy investments in countries now, because the scrutiny of us in the banking world is such that people really don't want us around. So yeah, we're just non-competitive globally, I think is the way to put it. Yeah. Let's hope not, but never say never. And I'd be more worried about the Lithuanians.
Yeah, I it's so I saw that the Polish president hightailed it down to Kiev today, and they, like Ben Hodges, is really all worked up that we won't give ATACMS to the Ukrainians. So the Poles are talking about naval missiles.
Yeah, naval strike missiles. The Norwegian missile, but it's a 250-pound warhead. It's not, it's great for small vessels, but I don't know what it's going to do against major targets.
Well, they'll just shoot it. They'll just lob them at Crimea. That's all.
just dump them all out the back of the truck.
Yeah,
Katusha.
Yeah, we're going to be, real quick. I have a story that I'll share with you. I did an internship before I went to college one summer in Japan. I worked for a bank in Japan, and the night I was leaving, I showed up at my boss's house, which sort of broke a lot of protocol. Smack drunk. I mean, and he had to get his wife and everybody out of bed, and they had to fix breakfast, and it was like 3 a.m, and I had to catch a plane the next morning, and I brought him a gift, okay, to say goodbye. I was a stupid American. I didn't know what was going on, and he turned literally pale in his own house, and because he was then bound to give me a gift, and I'll never forget this. He had the closet door open in the living room, down on his hands and knees with his kimono, with his ass hanging out, and stuff is coming out of the closet while he's trying to find a gift to give to me, and I started laughing, right, which just made it worse. and what I have, my picture now is that all the OTAN guys are down on their hands and knees with their kimono up around their waist, going through the closet trying to find shit to give Ukraine. Okay. And we're out of ideas at this particular point. We there's nothing, short of direct combat involvement. I don't think that there's a weapon system that we have that is a solution to the problem on the ground in southern and eastern Ukraine, which is 3 rows of fortified lines of defense and more mines than you can shake a stick at. And the answer isn't F-16s, because you're not going to get air superiority. The answer isn't anything that we've got, or that if we give away, that we can't live without, right? So I don't know what we're going to do.
The only way they're breaching that line is with an amphibious assault into Crimea, and they don't have the lift and they don't have the troops. So
No, they don't. They don't have. There's never been a Ukrainian navy to speak of. There's a shipyard in Ukraine, but there's never been a Ukrainian navy to speak of. Matt, your thoughts?
Neo Neon Arrakis. I almost called you Neocon Arrakis down there. Who I wanted to make sure I got that one right. Neon Arrakis, nuclear missiles. This is actually something that I had a bit of a brief internal conversation with a few people about the realities of nuclear war coming out of this. One of them is very well versed in this area and knows quite a bit about it. And the other person that I was conversing with, speaking out of fear, which is never a productive conversation because they're always looking to you for words of encouragement. It's like you ain't gonna get it from me. I'm an eternal optimist, but I ain't gonna. I'm an eternal optimist, but I ain't gonna tell you the weather is sunny outside when it's pouring rain. I'm gonna tell you the truth. But as far as nuclear weapons go, I am in the apparent minority in this. I do not believe there will be a nuclear exchange. I don't think so.
yeah, I don't either.
I don't. That's not going to happen. Now, what could happen? What could happen, and what I think is certainly within the realm of likelihoods, is there's an incident at Zaporizhia, however you pronounce it, the nuclear power plant that's in question. There could certainly be an incident there. I know that that reactor is partially shut down now, but it is still, obviously, it pegs the Carver meter. For anybody that knows what the Carver acronym is, you should familiarize yourself. Everyone should know what Carver is. But if there was to be something nuclear, it would involve that, and that's the one that you should probably be concerned about. But as far as a actual nuclear exchange, no, I don't think
I think
so.
they're down. I think they're down to one of the 6 reactors at this point. Is that correct? There's one reactor.
That's my understanding. Yeah, that's my understanding, and it's my understanding too that the IAEA is they brokered the deal to make sure that there was that reactor
Water.
would stay online and it would be safe from harm. That anyway, but that's neither here nor there. And I'm not going to go too deep into that. But that is the one that I would be concerned about, that there will be an incident there. I know we know the dam breaking. I'm fairly certain that the Ukrainians were behind that. That of course that's all but forgotten now. It was 2 weeks ago, and it's literally been memory old.
Yeah.
But that is the pond, or the lake rather, that is the cooling pond for the cooling towers of that nuclear reactor. And if it was at full capacity, they would have a problem right now. But since only one of the reactors is running, they have enough water, at least at the moment. Apparently will continue to be that way in a partial shutdown, where most their boilers are shut down. But to your point, though, as far as the nuclear exchange goes, no, I don't see that happening. Nuclear weapons are a deterrent for Europe and Europeans, and I'm saying that very, very specifically here, because if there was to be a nuclear exchange anywhere in the world, it's not going to be between Europe and NATO, Eastern Europe, so on and so forth, the CSTO bloc. It's not going to be them. It's going to be Pakistan and India. That's where you're going to see it, and it will be Pakistan that launches first. Promise. That is the one. I will hang my hat on it. That's the one.
Are you saying the Pakistanis
so-
aren't very stable? Come on.
Well,
Yeah,
that is a no. Short answer, no.
Imran
And
Khan is unavailable for comment, right?
well, Ron and I are going to do a show next week when he's back above the weather, uh, where we're diving into Imran Khan, and we're going to be talking about that because I don't think that's Imran Khan is a mystery to America. He's a mystery to Western media. We don't understand Pakistan. Hell, we don't understand anybody in that part of the world. But we definitely don't understand Pakistan and Imran Khan and the populism that gave him his rise to power, the dynamic that the Taliban plays now, the dynamic that ISIL plays as well, how the politics of Kashmir and politics of Modi all are kind of it's not even a three-way dance at this point. It's like a seven-way dance, and none of the outcomes of that are good. Um, and unfortunately, it pains me to say this, but I think that China right now is really the most influential stabilizing partner in Pakistan long term, and that's not good. That is not good at all. But it seems like it's the reality.
You know, you mentioned Modi in India. I have it on good authority, according to the president of the United States, that he's actually the prime minister of China. So, it's
Yeah,
good
but-
Well,
authority.
yeah,
that's the same,
you were gonna steal my thunder
Well-
there because I wanted to go out with some good words that at least we can hang our hat on is that Putin's losing the war in Iraq. So that's
Yeah, I'm really glad that he's.
At least we have
When they
that,
lost
right?
Karbala, that
at least
was
we
it.
have that.
You'll always have Karbala.
Mhm.
Oh.
All right, guys. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, we will see you next week, and have a great balance of the week. As we go off, Matt, hang on because I want to talk a little bit about the G camp and what have you. So if you got a minute,
Absolutely.
otherwise I'll circle back to you. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody. And let's stay safe and let's keep your head on a swivel. But if you two are looking for housing in Minsk, I have a number of good real estate agents that can help you out. I think you're going to see. I think a lot of the other bad actors in Russia, particularly in the cyber sphere, I think they're going to be opening offices in Minsk if they're not already there.
Yeah.
I think Minsk is going to become the prickly end of the cyber spear, because again, it gives the Russians the ability to say, "It's not us. It's not us. It's the Belarusians." And we like them. They're part of our family, but everybody's got a family member that's a meth head and whatever. And so I think you're going to start to hear those lines. I think Lavrov is practicing those lines in front of the mirror as we speak so that he can do it as only Lavrov can do it. So thank you all. Have a great evening. We'll